Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to talk about something that literally changed the shape of America, the steel skeleton that the modern nation was built on, the Transcontinental Railroad. Okay, so to really get a grip on how huge this was, you got to picture this. You want to get from New York to California in the early 1800s. It wasn't just a trip, it was a life or death expedition. We're talking wagons, riverboats, and some incredibly dangerous trails. I mean, the difference the railroad made was just night and day. What used to take months of dangerous travel, where you were literally risking your life, suddenly got shrunk down to just a few days. This one change was about to transform everything. So that begs the question, right? Why go through all this trouble? Why was such a massive, monumental project even necessary in the first place? Well, picture this. It's the 1860s. The country is growing like crazy, but it's really a nation of two halves. You've got the West, which is loaded with resources, gold, timber, you name it, but it was almost totally cut off from the industrial hubs and the centers of power back east.
So the thinking was, a railroad would do way more than just move people around. It was about stitching the nation back together after a brutal civil war. It was about getting people to settle those huge Western lands. And, maybe most importantly, it was about creating a powerhouse economy by connecting all those Eastern factories with all those Western resources.
All right, so what was the answer? It turned out to be this incredible engineering feat that was really a race, not just against the clock, but a race to connect a continent from two directions at the exact same time. And get this, right in the middle of the Civil War, in 1862, Congress passes the Pacific Railway Act. They basically gave the green light, officially kicking off one of the most ambitious building projects in human history. Now, the way they did this was super interesting. It wasn't just one line. It was a race from two different directions. You had the Union Pacific starting in Nebraska and building west, mostly with Irish immigrant labor. And at the same time, the Central Pacific was starting in California and building east with a huge workforce of Chinese immigrants. They were all racing to meet somewhere in the middle. And let's be clear, this was brutal, back-breaking work. The human cost was just enormous. These workers were blasting tunnels through solid granite. They were enduring scorching desert heat and then freezing mountain winters, all while dealing with rampant disease and constant, deadly accidents. And when we talk about the workforce, the numbers are just staggering. Just on the western side, building east, you had more than 10,000 Chinese immigrants who were absolutely essential to getting this thing built, especially through the treacherous Sierra Nevada mountains. But, it's so important to remember that this incredible progress had a dark side. The Chinese laborers, the ones who did some of the most dangerous work, were paid way less than their white coworkers, and they faced just terrible discrimination. It's a really difficult but crucial part of this whole story. So after all that sweat and blood and years of grueling work, the two lines finally met at a single point in the Utah desert. And the world changed, like, overnight. I mean, just look at this timeline. It's kind of hard to believe, right? This massive project, crossing almost 2,000 miles of some of the toughest territory imaginable, was finished in just 7 years. Astounding. And then came the big moment. May 10th, 1869. They drive in the final symbolic golden spike at a place called Promontory Point. And instantly, a telegraph message zips across the country with these exact words, letting a waiting nation know the continent was finally connected. The impact on just getting from point A to point B was, well, it's almost impossible to overstate. The travel time between coasts wasn't just cut, it was slashed by 97%, from months down to about a week. And it wasn't just people. Look at these shipping costs. Before the railroad, shipping a ton of goods cost a fortune, over $1,000. After 150, this completely changed the game for trade, for farming, for everything. So what did all this mean? Well, it meant America was no longer a bunch of separate regions. It was one huge connected market. And fun fact, to make sure all the trains actually ran on time across this massive network, they literally had to invent standard time zones, the very same ones we use today. But here's where it gets even bigger. The railroad didn't just move the economy, it created it. It was the engine that kicked America's Industrial Revolution into high gear. You can really see that ripple effect here. First, you build the railroad. To do that, you need a mind-boggling amount of steel and coal. So, boom, those industries just explode. And all that new industrial power, well, it fuels the growth of pretty much every other manufacturing sector. And all that demand, well, it gave birth to the era of big business. Guys like Andrew Carnegie built massive steel empires just to keep up. This was really the beginning of that powerful and sometimes kind of shady partnership between big government and big industry. But we can't tell this story without talking about the other side of the coin. Because for all the progress and all the connection, there was a whole lot of conflict and pain.
Yeah, you really have to look at these two columns side by side. For the settlers, it meant new towns, new markets, a whole new life in the West. But for Native American tribes, it was devastating. The rails just sliced right through their ancestral lands, their sacred sites. The buffalo, their entire way of life, were nearly wiped out, partly to feed the railroad crews and clear the way. It was a disaster that pushed them onto reservations.
So, in the end, the Transcontinental Railroad was, without a doubt, a major turning point. It united the nation, it fired up industrial growth, it reshaped the American West. But it also laid bare the really high and often brutal costs of that expansion. And, understanding both sides of that story, the good and the bad, is absolutely crucial to understanding how America became the country it is today. Which leaves us with a pretty tough question, one that we're still grappling with. Progress might be inevitable, but is its price